Welcome to our sanctuary. Find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let it go slowly. Feel the weight of the day begin to dissolve. Tonight, we open the door to a world of contradictions. The world of Victorian London. This era, often pictured in sepia-toned portraits of elegant ladies and sober gentlemen, held secrets beneath its immaculate façade. We are not here to view the grand boulevards and opulent drawing rooms, but the hidden mechanics of a colossal, anxious, and surprisingly filthy society. We will embark on a journey through the layers of this world. First, we descend into the overwhelming silent darkness of the city's vast sewer network, following the footsteps of the scavengers who braved its filth for scraps of forgotten wealth. This is the truth of Victorian poverty. Then, we rise to witness the sheer ambition of the engineer who battled the pervasive disease and the great stink that nearly paralyzed the empire. Finally, we explore the anxieties that haunted the elite, the rigid, almost suffocating social rules of the formal dinner party, and the bizarre, sometimes dangerous, cures sought by those who could not find sleep in the noise of the modern world. Two faces of the same city, the brutal reality of the depths and the nervous, complicated order of the surface. Let the rhythmic flow of this history calm your modern mind as we search for the profound peace found in recognizing the sheer, stubborn endurance of the human spirit. We begin our immersion by descending far below the meticulously paved streets of Victorian London into the labyrinthine world of the sewer network itself. This world was the domain of the Tosher, a secretive subculture of scavengers whose existence was entirely invisible to the Londoners living just a few feet above their heads. Imagine standing at a brick archway near the River Thames at low tide, the only time entry is possible. You carry only a flickering lantern, which casts long dancing shadows on the curved, damp brickwork, and a long, sturdy staff to feel for solid footing in the darkness. The sounds of the world above the rumble of carriages, the cries of vendors are muffled and distant, replaced by the constant, hypnotic sloshing of effluent and the unnerving echo of your own breath. You wade through thigh-deep effluent, and the overwhelming stench is the least of your immediate concerns. The air is thick, not just with decay, but with the threat of poisonous gas pockets, primarily methane and hydrogen sulfide, that can kill silently. These pockets required constant vigilance and specialized knowledge, turning every blind corner into a game of lethal chance. Then there is the water itself. A sudden downpour in the city above, or a malfunction at the river's mouth, could trigger a swift and deadly tidal surge, trapping the Tosher with nowhere to go in the dark, intricate tunnels. The fear of getting utterly lost in the vast, labyrinthine network, never to find the next manhole or archway, was a quiet terror that accompanied every step. Your focus is driven entirely by the flicker of your lantern and the feel of your staff. You are searching for your prize, anything that was lost and washed away from the streets above. This included valuable items like lost coins and dropped jewellery, along with scrap materials such as metal and bone that could still be sold for a pittance upon your return. The life of the Tosher was a brutal paradox, risking instant death in the darkness to recover lost wealth that barely amounted to a living wage. They were a secret society, with their own codes and fiercely defended territories, living an existence that few in the sunlight above could ever imagine, defined entirely by the pervasive filth and the sporadic glint of fortune. The necessity of the Tosher's dangerous trade was a direct symptom of the city's vast, growing problem. A problem that culminated in the infamous Great Stink of 1858. For years, London had been dumping raw sewage directly into the River Thames, turning the city's central artery into an open sewer. The stench was a pervasive, constant reminder of the failure of the city's sanitation. But the problem was much darker than just smell. The prevailing belief at the time was the miasma theory, which suggested that disease like cholera, which repeatedly devastated the city, was caused by bad air. When the summer of 1858 brought a period of intense, prolonged heat, the smell rising from the Thames became so unbearable that it literally forced Parliament to act. Imagine the air inside the Parliament building itself, where members were attempting to conduct the essential business of the empire. The smell was so overwhelming that curtains had to be soaked in disinfectant, and some meetings had to be moved, as the river's polluted water sloshed against the very foundations of the building. This environmental crisis, fueled by fear of disease and a profound sense of civic humiliation, created the political will necessary for a massive radical change. Into this crisis stepped Joseph Bazalgette, a brilliant, methodical civil engineer. He had already spent years planning and refining a solution, understanding that incremental changes would not save London. Bazalgette recognized that the city needed an entirely new, revolutionary sewer system. His plan was not merely functional, it was elegant and vast, creating a colossal network of 82 miles of massive intercepting sewers, designed to divert the entire city's waste downstream, routing it far east of the city centre and beyond the reach of the residential areas. Bazalgette's vision was not just engineering, it was a profound act of urban therapy, designed to clean the city's bloodstream and restore public health. Bazalgette's task was an engineering challenge of unprecedented scale and complexity, a true test of Victorian ambition against the brute realities of the underground world. His plans were meticulous, hand-drawn, and ambitious. He faced immense hurdles, including the necessity of tunnelling under a living, breathing city, which meant navigating foundations, existing infrastructure, and the constant threat of collapses without disrupting the millions of inhabitants above. His construction required crossing the River Thames itself multiple times, utilising massive pumping stations that were feats of mechanical architecture in their own right. The sheer scale of the project required innovation at every level. Bazalgette needed materials that could withstand the constant corrosive flow of waste, so his team famously experimented and relied heavily on Portland cement, inventing a new and durable standard for construction that endures to this day. The work was relentless, conducted over many years, utilising thousands of labourers who were effectively working in the constant danger and darkness of the sewer world. The ultimate impact of Bazalgette's work was swift and undeniable. Once the intercepting sewers were operational, they drastically reduced the instances of cholera and other waterborne diseases, fundamentally saving London from repeated epidemics. The air cleared, and the great stink receded into memory. Bazalgette's revolutionary design, characterised by its meticulous planning and durability, became the model for cities worldwide that were struggling to cope with industrial growth and mass urbanisation. His work, largely unseen and uncelebrated during its execution, was arguably the most significant public health achievement of the Victorian age. A vast, silent, subterranean triumph of order and engineering over chaos and disease. Bazalgette's achievement went far beyond public health. It was a profound act of urban psychology. By removing the constant visible threat of disease and the overwhelming smell of the great stink, he effectively restored the belief in Ma'at, the sense of order, to the British Empire's capital. His network of intercepting sewers was not merely drainage. It was an invisible, underground promise of stability. Imagine the silent, meticulous work of the engineers who created this new, hidden underworld. The tunnels were not straight. They had to be designed with a precise, gentle gradient that allowed gravity to do the work, ensuring the sewage flowed fast enough to prevent sediment build-up, but not so fast as to damage the brickwork. This required an immense, meticulous survey of the entire city's topography. The sound of this labour was the rhythmic chipping of thousands of unseen masons working deep below the city, crafting perfect arching tunnels that stretched for miles. The sewage system became the unseen antithesis of the Toshers' chaotic world. Where the Tosher sought accidental treasure in random flow, Bazalgette imposed engineered efficiency and predictable velocity. He created a subterranean world ruled by order, not chance. The structures of his pumping stations, like the magnificent Abbey Mills in Stratford, were designed in a bold, architectural style, often described as Byzantine or Romanesque, a testament to the Victorian belief that even the infrastructure dealing with waste must be beautiful, reflecting the moral purity of the work. These buildings stood above ground as proud, visible temples to unseen efficiency, offering quiet assurance that London's essential heart was now clean and functioning. The entire system was an investment in the long-term well-being of the population, a foundation of public trust built on the simple, constant flow of water and gravity. With the major physical threat of cholera receding thanks to clean water, the anxieties of Victorian life shifted inward, becoming psychological. The elite and middle classes, no longer preoccupied with the smell of the Thames, became obsessed with the internal chaos of the mind, particularly insomnia. Sleeplessness was widely believed to be a symptom of overstimulated nerves caused by the relentless pace of modern industrial life. The noise of the city, the complexity of business, and the constant influx of new information. This psychological affliction was viewed as a profound moral and physical failure, a sign that the delicate mechanism of the Victorian mind was breaking down. Imagine the atmosphere in a wealthy London home at midnight. The gaslight has been turned low, but the occupant cannot rest. The sounds of the day are replaced by the anxious murmur of their own internal monologue. This widespread anxiety fueled a thriving, bizarre industry dedicated to restoring sleep. Individuals were desperate for a simple solution to quiet the busy brain. This desperation led them to consume and rely upon a wide range of commercially available patent medicines and sleep tonics. A tour of these remedies reveals a genuinely shocking and unsettling aspect of Victorian medicine. Many of these popular, readily available tonics contain profoundly dangerous ingredients. Picture the apothecary's shelf, filled with bottles promising peace, but containing alcohol, high concentrations of opium, laudanum, or even chloroform. The sound of these cures being administered would be the slow, measured clink of a glass spoon against a glass bottle, followed by the bitter, medicinal taste of potent sedatives. This practice was normalized, turning self-medication into a daily ritual. The desire for tranquility was so great that the Victorians willingly ingested poisons, risking addiction and death just to quiet their overactive minds, highlighting the profound pressure of maintaining the facade of success and mental equilibrium in the new industrial age. The Victorian obsession with technology and mechanics, the same impulse that powered Bazalgette's pumps, extended into the search for sleep, leading to an array of truly bizarre, often ineffective, mechanical and electrical cures. This was the era where problems were believed to be solved by clever application of machinery, and anxiety was viewed as a fault in the body's mechanics. Imagine entering a special room dedicated entirely to the restoration of sleep. You might find elaborate, large devices designed to physically manipulate the body or environment. These included devices such as vibrating beds, designed to shake the nerves into submission, and cumbersome magnetic corsets. These corsets were meant to be worn all night, promising to align the body's internal energies with the Earth's magnetic field, thereby ensuring harmony and rest. The sound of the treatment would be the low, unnerving hum of the mechanical vibration or the sharp click of metal springs as the magnetic corset was fastened. Equally strange was the reliance on atmospheric control. Wealthy Victorians invested in elaborate ventilation systems designed specifically to circulate fresh night air. The belief was that stale air was fundamentally toxic to the nerves. Beyond the mechanical, the advice from popular sleep manuals was often highly prescriptive and peculiar. Insomniacs were advised to adhere to bland diets, completely avoiding exciting novels before bed, as they overstimulated the mind, and most curiously to sleep with their head pointing north. This alignment was believed to synchronize the sleeper's personal magnetism with the planetary forces, leading to natural, unburdened sleep. The absurdity of these detailed, rigid practices reveals a civilization struggling to impose absolute order on the most chaotic, personal, and uncontrollable aspect of human life, the subconscious mind. If the sewer was the realm of the physical unpredictable, the formal Victorian dinner party was the realm of the psychological, unpredictable, a carefully managed theatre of social anxiety and rigid control. This was the ultimate expression of the Victorian need for order, where every action, from the invitation to the final sip of port, was governed by unspoken laws. Imagine receiving the formal invitation. The rigidity began immediately with the seating plan. This plan was not casual, it was a science. It was strategically designed by the hostess to reflect precise social status and to facilitate specific, planned political or business conversations. A peer would always be seated above a baron. A young diplomat might be placed next to an influential society matron. The sound of this arrangement would be the faint, crisp rustle of the paper upon which the seating diagram was meticulously drawn, a private map of the evening's social hierarchy. To violate the seating arrangement was not merely rude, it was an act of social chaos, a subtle affront to the cosmic order of the upper class. The atmosphere at the table was one of practiced formality. The sound was not of raucous laughter, but of measured, controlled conversation, punctuated by the delicate clink of silverware. The guests were faced with a bewildering, terrifying array of cutlery. The silverware was specifically designed, with different forks and knives designated for fish, meat, salad, dessert, and fruit, each one used in a strict, sequential order. To fumble the sequence, to use the wrong knife for the wrong course, was an immediate, quiet signal of inferior social standing. The entire meal was a high-stakes examination, where simple hunger was overridden by the anxiety of perfect execution, a subtle demonstration that even biological needs were subject to the absolute, unforgiving order of Victorian etiquette. The anxiety of the dinner party extended directly to the rules of conversation, which were as strictly governed as the use of silverware. Certain topics were strictly avoided, particularly those that were too contentious, personal, or vulgar. The hostess's primary job was to keep the conversational flow smooth, predictable, and free from the chaos of genuine disagreement. The tradition of conversation was rigidly divided by gender and physical placement. For the first half of the dinner, a man was expected to converse exclusively with the woman seated on his right. Halfway through the meal, often signalled by the removal of a specific course, he would smoothly turn his attention and conversation to the woman on his left. This rigid, clockwork shift reinforced the sense that even personal interaction was a carefully choreographed performance, a demonstration of control. The evening culminated in the ultimate gender-based separation, the ritual of the ladies withdrawing. Once the main courses were finished, the women would rise and retire to the drawing room, leaving the men alone. This deliberate exclusion allowed the men to engage in private, masculine conversation, typically involving politics, business, and finance, over port and cigars. The atmosphere in the men's room would shift immediately. The conversation would become louder, freer, and more blunt. The women, meanwhile, would maintain their rigid formality in the drawing room, waiting for the men to rejoin them. This segregation was the final statement of the Victorian order. Even in a private home, society was governed by absolute, non-negotiable lines of hierarchy and gender, confirming that the order sought in the sewers and the sleep cures was mirrored in the intricate, suffocating social structure of the elite. We now return to the dark, wet reality of the Toshers' world, delving into the raw economic drive behind their perilous trade. The Toshers were experts in what the city had discarded. Their long staffs were not merely for balance, they were used to methodically rake through the thigh-deep effluent, feeling for the telltale shape or weight of value. The sound was a dull, rhythmic tapping against the sewer floor, a sound that spoke of tireless, dangerous hope. Their primary economic prize was the small accidental wealth flushed down from the streets. Lost coins, slipped from pockets or dropped in the gutter, and pieces of dropped jewellery. Imagine the stark visual contrast, the dull black sludge parting just enough to reveal a momentary flash of silver or gold, a tiny precious reward for a colossal risk. Beyond the immediate glint of precious metals, the Toshers collected less glamorous but essential items: scrap metal, chunks of valuable fat, grease, and even bones which could be sold to rendering plants or used in early manufacturing. These scraps represented the silent, hidden economy of Victorian waste, an entire market built upon the city's refuse. The danger of their work created a secretive subculture. The Toshers had their own unspoken rules, signals, and fiercely defended territories within the labyrinthine tunnels. To intrude on another's claimed section was to risk a violent confrontation in the total darkness, where discovery meant physical threat from rivals or capture by the law, as their activities were often viewed as illegal trespassing and scavenging on municipal property. This hidden life, existing completely invisible to the respectable Londoners, just feet above underscored the ultimate social disparity of the Victorian era. The vast wealth and luxury of the surface were built upon, and literally drained into, a brutal underworld where human life was risked daily for the smallest fraction of that luxury. The work of the Tosher provided a stark, quiet commentary. The price of London's cleanliness was the constant, unseen suffering of its most desperate inhabitants. The shift in anxiety from the physical filth of the Thames to the psychological chaos of the mind was starkly reflected in the advice offered by Victorian sleep manuals. These guides viewed sleeplessness as a societal failing, not merely a personal one. The underlying fear was that the complexity of modern life, the rapid communication, the intense business, the constant demands on attention was causing the mind's machinery to overheat. The manuals contained detailed, often contradictory advice designed to bring absolute order to the subconscious. One common piece of counsel was the precise regulation of diet, insisting on bland diets free of stimulating spices or rich foods. The sound of a typical Victorian insomniac's dinner would be a quiet, unenthusiastic clinking of a spoon against a bowl of plain gruel. This was an attempt to starve the overstimulated nerves into submission. Another recurring theme was the danger of exciting novels. Reading anything too gripping or emotional before bed was considered mentally reckless, as it introduced chaos into the mind's final vital moments of quiet contemplation. The approved reading material was often dry, religious, or technical, anything to bore the mind into tranquility. Perhaps the most curious advice involved the belief in planetary alignment and magnetic fields. Insomnia manuals seriously advised readers to sleep with their head pointing north. This practice was based on a pseudo-scientific belief that aligning the body's personal magnetism with the Earth's magnetic field would restore internal harmony and facilitate natural sleep. These detailed, rigid requirements from food to fiction to cardinal direction demonstrated the absolute Victorian commitment to imposing external order on a problem that was fundamentally internal and uncontrollable. The ultimate irony was that the very effort required to follow these meticulous rules often increased the insomniac's anxiety, perpetuating the sleeplessness they desperately sought to cure. We shift now to the surface world and the supreme battleground of Victorian psychological order, the formal upper-class dinner party. This event began not at the table, but with the invitations and the seating plan, a ritual of status and subtle social warfare. The seating plan was the hostess's masterpiece, a strategically designed map meant to reflect and reinforce the rigid social hierarchy of the entire assembly. Every guest was placed according to rank, title, and importance, and any mistake by the hostess could lead to lasting social damage or political embarrassment. The seating was designed to achieve multiple calculated goals: securing social status, a peer ranked above a baronet; facilitating political conversations, placing influential men next to one another during the port stage; and even creating opportunities for desired romantic matches, placing eligible young ladies next to suitable gentlemen. The hostess might spend days perfecting this diagram, which was essentially a private declaration of the city's current social truth. The sound of the dinner party's initial phase was the crisp, polite rustle of silk and starched linen, followed by the muffled, low murmur of forced conversation. The moment a guest entered the room, the anxiety began. To even momentarily hesitate before finding your assigned seat, or worse, to mistakenly take another's place, was a silent and immediate admission of social ignorance or chaos. The entire evening was a performance of precision. The rigidity of the structure guaranteed that the participants' minds were constantly occupied by the external rules, leaving little room for spontaneous thought or genuine interaction. This constant preoccupation with external order was the upper class's own version of the thought trap, a necessary distraction from the internal anxieties of the modern world. Once seated, the guest faced the most terrifying practical challenge: the bewildering array of silverware. The sheer number and specialized function of the knives and forks were a deliberate test of one's social fitness. The place setting was an arsenal of polished metal. Different forks and knives were strictly designated for fish, meat, salad, dessert, and fruit. The rule was simple: always start with the utensil furthest from the plate and work your way inward. Imagine the quiet, intense focus required. The sounds of the dinner table were dominated by the delicate, continuous clinking of the cutlery against the fine porcelain, a rhythmic sound that underscored the tension. The act of eating, a basic biological necessity, was transformed into a high-stakes demonstration of knowledge and control. To mistakenly use the salad fork for the fish course, or to fumble the sequential order, was an immediate, if silent, social failure, a signal to the entire table that the guest lacked the necessary cultural refinement. The food itself, served in multiple, often overwhelming courses, added to the complexity. The entire meal became an exercise in controlled consumption. The goal was not merely to eat, but to navigate the ritual of eating perfectly. The anxiety of perfect execution overridden the pleasure of the food, forcing the mind to focus entirely on the external, measurable task of the ritual. This constant imposition of order onto the natural human need for sustenance perfectly reflected the Victorian obsession with structure. Nothing, not even hunger, was immune to the absolute laws of etiquette. The ultimate demonstration of the Victorian social structure was the culminating ritual that marked the end of the main meal, the ladies' withdrawing. This tradition was enacted with formal precision. Upon a quiet signal from the hostess, the women would rise collectively and retire to the drawing room, leaving the men entirely alone at the table. This was not merely a break, it was a deliberate, powerful act of gender-based segregation. The atmosphere in the dining room would shift immediately. The controlled, polite murmur was replaced by a more blunt, freer, and louder conversational tone. The sound changed from the delicate clinking of silverware to the thud of cigar boxes being opened and the sharp click of glasses as the men turned their attention to port and politics. This separation allowed the men to engage in private, masculine conversation, typically focused on business, finance, and political maneuvering without the perceived constraints of female presence. Meanwhile, the women in the drawing room were expected to maintain the social façade. They would continue a softer form of conversation, often centered on domestic affairs or non-controversial subjects, waiting for the men to rejoin them. This strict division reinforced the Victorian ideology that public life, power, and high finance were the domain of men, while domestic order and social refinement belonged to women. The dinner party, therefore, was a contained social experiment, a brief, intense period of imposed order that ended with a return to the natural segregated roles dictated by gender and class, confirming that the order sought in the sewers and the sleep cures was built into the very fabric of society. The desperation for sleep among the Victorian middle and upper classes led to a truly unsettling market of commercially available patent medicines and tonics, all promising to quiet the overstimulated nerves, but often delivering chemical dependence and danger. The Victorian belief in quick, marketable fixes meant these remedies were consumed widely and without deep scrutiny. Imagine the contents of these elegant glass bottles. They often contained high concentrations of truly alarming ingredients. Many popular tonics relied heavily on alcohol, providing immediate, if temporary, sedation. More perilously, compounds containing opium, such as laudanum, were commonplace, easily purchased, and widely ingested by insomniacs. Even more shockingly, some tonics utilized chemicals like chloroform for their powerful sedative properties. The sound of this self-medication was the slow, measured clink of a glass spoon against a glass bottle, a ritual performed in the quiet desperation of the bedroom. The willing ingestion of these potent, dangerous chemicals, risking instant poisoning, long-term addiction, or death, underscored the profound pressure the Victorians felt to maintain the appearance of mental health and stability. They chose a known chemical peril over the unknown, unpredictable chaos of a sleepless mind. This era's solution to anxiety was often a cocktail of habit-forming poisons, highlighting the dark contradiction between the age's technological advancement and its shockingly primitive understanding of pharmacology and mental health. The ultimate irony was that the very cure for their anxiety often perpetuated a deeper, hidden internal chaos. The subterranean world of the Toshers was not just dangerous due to gas pockets and floods. It was a complex, self-regulated society with its own rigid codes and customs. Living in an invisible world demanded specialized knowledge, knowledge of the tunnels, the tide schedules, and, most importantly, the unwritten laws of the subculture. Imagine a secret meeting of Toshers. The atmosphere is tense, the light is dim, and the language is full of specific slang and professional jargon that no one on the surface would understand. Their existence was a constant performance of vigilance, dictated by the rhythm of the Thames's tides. The most vital unwritten law was the sanctity of territory. A section of the sewer, once claimed, was fiercely defended, and to encroach upon another Tosher's hunting ground was to risk a violent confrontation in the total darkness. This strict enforcement of boundaries, born out of economic necessity, was their version of social order in a place devoid of civil law. Furthermore, the community relied on shared knowledge to survive. Information about a collapse, a scheduled maintenance closure, or a particularly rich area of recent valuable runoff was shared only among trusted members, emphasizing that cooperation and secrecy were the two pillars of their survival. The Toshers were an unintended consequence of Bazalgette's system, a human subculture born in the elegant, ordered drainage system, yet defined by the desperate chaos of poverty. Their quiet, difficult existence provided a necessary, if unsettling, service, retrieving lost materials from the city's waste stream before they were permanently flushed out into the river, sustaining a secondary, unseen economy beneath the feet of respectable society. We return to the quiet confidence of the engineer, Joseph Bazalgette, whose method provided the ultimate contrast to the chaos of the Toshers' world. Bazalgette's primary power lay in his meticulous hand-drawn plans. These were not sketches. They were colossal, detailed blueprints that accounted for every shift in elevation, every curve of the tunnel, and the precise placement of every pumping station. Imagine the sheer intellectual focus required, mapping an entire living city underground, utilizing the natural fall of the land to create a sewage system that relied entirely on the passive force of gravity. The sound of Bazalgette's work was the constant, low rhythm of construction, punctuated by the precise, measured commands of foremen, ensuring that every brick in the 82 miles of sewers was perfectly laid. This insistence on perfection and scientific predictability was the ultimate expression of the Victorian drive for order over chaos. His reliance on innovation, such as testing and perfecting the use of Portland cement, reflected a civilization dedicated to mastering its environment through engineering. The sewage system was his masterpiece, an invisible, subterranean monument to public health that, once completed, fundamentally altered the longevity and quality of life for millions. The quiet, invisible success of his work ensured that London's growth could continue unabated, built upon a foundation of clean water and managed waste, transforming the city from a toxic risk into a model of urban functionality. The system's enduring stability offered a silent, profound assurance that Ma'at, or order, was indeed achievable through human ingenuity. The stories of the Tosher, Bazalgette, and the rigid society of the dinner party ultimately reveal a single unifying paradox. The Victorians could only find peace by imposing absolute order. The city was clean only because Bazalgette imposed a rigid geometric design on the subterranean chaos, removing the filth from sight. The elite found safety from anxiety only by imposing ritualistic, suffocating rules on their bodies, magnetic corsets, precise forks, and their social interactions' rigid seating plans, controlled conversation. And the Tosher, living in the lowest chaos, sought his own stability through a brutal, self-imposed code of territoriality and silence. The fear of the random, the unpredictable, whether it was cholera, social gaffe, or a sleepless night, was the true engine of this era. The cost of this relentless pursuit of order was the loss of spontaneity, the loss of genuine emotion, and the willing consumption of dangerous, mind-altering substances. We leave these worlds now, accepting the strange truth that a civilization which achieved so much in terms of physical order remained so internally chaotic. We arrive now at the final quiet reflection, on the dual nature of Victorian London, the city of the tosher and the city of the rigid dinner party. Our journey has revealed a single, unifying truth. The vast energy of the Victorian age was spent on one pursuit, imposing absolute, visible order on a world that felt increasingly chaotic and unpredictable. The entire civilization was defined by the anxiety of the moment, the fear that the system would fail. The rich feared cholera and the public shame of social gaffe. The poor feared the tide and starvation. The solution, in both the filth of the sewers and the elegance of the dining room, was to create ritual and predictability. Bazalgette created a system of predictable flow using gravity. The insomniac created a system of predictable ritual by sleeping with their head pointing north. And the elite created a predictable social ritual using the precise sequence of forks. The constant effort to master the unmasterable, whether the tide, the disease, or the subconscious mind, was the true burden of the Victorian spirit. Let this paradox settle into your own mind now. By focusing so intently on the detailed, rigid rules of this past world, your own immediate, smaller worries about the present day begin to dissolve. The anxieties that haunted the Victorians, the fear of random disease, the worry over a misplaced fork, the distress of a sleepless night, were ultimately conquered not by wealth, but by a relentless, stubborn insistence on structure. The profound peace of this history lies in understanding that even the greatest chaos can be contained by meticulous, focused attention to detail. We acknowledge the chaos, we contain it with ritual, and then we let it go. We now leave the structured narrative behind, surrendering to the final deep quiet of the past. The voices of the toshers, the clinking of the specialized cutlery, and the hum of the bizarre mechanical beds all fade into the silence of the centuries. Hear only the water. Let your mind focus on the sound of the silent, steady flow of Joseph Bazalgette's massive, unseen, intercepting sewers, a constant rhythmic murmur deep beneath the earth. This flow represents the triumph of order over disease, the invisible promise of cleanliness and health. Your mind, too, is now cleansed of the day's effluent and chaos. Feel the profound comfort of the rhythm of the night air, gently circulating in the quiet room. There is nothing left to organize, nothing left to worry about. The battle for order has been fought and won by the people of the past. Your task is only to accept the resulting peace. Let the silence guide your thoughts into deep rest. We leave you now in the deep, tranquil knowledge that the greatest endurance comes not from fighting chaos, but from accepting the quiet, steady rhythm of the systems that hold the world together. Drift deeply,